All right. So the thing that consumes most of my uh, thoughts and opinions about like what I want to talk about on this channel and help people with and stuff is basically just thinking outside the box. Basically, to take the traditions that we have in the church and come to the realization that they are traditions. Don't abandon doctrines and stuff like that, but start thinking about the traditions and how we can do better. And for me, one of the ways that we do that, that I do that, is by imagining like if I'm doing this from scratch, if I'm going to pretend like I don't know anything and I'm going to think about, for example, ministering or something like that, how would I do it from scratch? How would I set it up? And so there's lots of different examples of where you could do this, but that's the basic idea of what I would like to help people with. One of the ones that came up recently was I saw a video where these rogue missionaries, they're not even missionaries. These rogue members of the church um, took out Facebook ads in Africa. Did you hear about this?
No.
So they took out Facebook ads in Africa. They bought like $50 worth of Facebook ads and then $100 worth of Facebook ads. And apparently in Africa, that goes a long ways because there's not a lot of companies vying for the advertising markets of Africa. Even though there's a bunch of people on Facebook, there's not people wanting to sell products to people in Africa, I guess. So it's pretty cheap.
Hmm.
So these rogue members of the church um, took out Facebook ads that basically say, hey, the church is great, the church is true, there's been a restoration, Christ is coming, you guys should know all about it. Click on the link below to get a free Book of Mormon. And so they throw the advertisements out there and people start clicking on the links to get a free Book of Mormon. So at that point, I'll pause in the story and say the church is the perfect candidate for this market, right? Because the church is a charity, effectively. The church has money and they're not selling anything. The church isn't profiting from any of these advertisements like companies are. Like, if I'm trying to sell a razor, I need to get money out of my advertisements. The church isn't trying to do that. The church is just throwing money at advertisements like they did in Times Square. It's like probably the stupidest advertising campaign ever. So they put these advertisements in Facebook in Africa where the church has all to gain, everything to gain, because all they're trying to gain is interest and membership and prayer and spirituality and people taking the gospel seriously. So we don't care who takes us seriously. Like the church doesn't care where people get baptized. They want people to get baptized anywhere. So why not put the money where it's going to be most effective at getting this message to the most amount of people, which right now is in Africa. So anyway, rogue members take out these advertisements. Mission presidents and missionaries in Africa start getting flooded with requests for the Book of Mormon, and they don't even know where they're coming from. Like hundreds of requests are coming in, and they're like, what is going on? And so everybody's trying to figure it out and help and like, oh, what's going on here? So one of the guys that was helping with it said, the church missionary program is really good at producing missionaries and not very good at helping the missionaries be effective at producing converts or sharing the gospel in efficient ways. And when he said that, I was like, man, that is so true. Like we are dialed in when it comes to the missionaries' experience. We have you fill out the application, right? I'm going to serve 2 years. You fill out the application, submit it. You get a call that arrives to your house, or now it's in your email or whatever. Open it up and like, oh, I'm going to this place. And they tell you how to dress, they tell you what to take, they tell you when to be there, they tell you who your mission president's going to be, who your leader's going to be. You get there, you get assigned a trainer, and the trainer works with you for a while, and then you become a trainer. And the whole time you have this setup that's basically a military setup. right? It's the military brotherhood setup that is designed to give a missionary this very strong cookie cutter experience. Um, but as far as effectiveness, that's not really the focus. Like there's probably a few people somewhere that are studying the effectiveness of how we're doing missionary work. Like how many doors do you have to knock to get a convert? Like that kind of thing. Um, but this little example recently illustrates how the church hasn't really thought outside the box on this in a while. So that's like one
Huh.
small example that I've been rolling around in my head where I'm like, what do I need to do? Like if I'm a bishop in my local ward, do I literally just make a 30-second advertisement and spend $1,000 on Facebook and tell my whole area that I'm a steward of, like tell them like, hey, I'm the bishop of this area. Come and join us on Sunday. We're going to be there. It's going to be cool. We'll meet you. We'll be friendly. Like it's going to be great. Like, is that what needs to happen? Is like, I personally need to start taking out Facebook ads to kind of break the mold. Or do I just
Yeah.
or do I just lean on the church? Like, nope, the church will take care of that. Headquarters, they've got all that stuff figured out. I'll just wait for their money and time to work on it. I don't know. Thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I have no idea the inner workings of the church. Yeah, obviously they have done, you brought up Times Square. I remember them doing a blitz campaign in my mission while I was there. And there was kind of this whole rollout of like billboards and commercials, and I think even things sent by mail. Um, but I don't know where that came from. Was that like a team of dedicated experts that they're doing this like 24/7 around, the world? Or was it kind of like not an expert, somebody's idea, they got budget approval, and it was just kind of executed? I don't even remember how effective it was. In fact, part of me thinks that I left to go home in the middle of it. Um, but yeah, I have no idea. And it's interesting, the whole rogue people in Africa and the dollar going so far there. Um, yeah, I don't know what the church does. I mean, obviously, like I'm on a few like I'm on X a little bit. I don't watch a ton of TV, but even like here in Utah, I don't see a lot of like outreach outside of like the church just existing and being such a huge footprint here. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, and it must be a signal that we don't hear any like awesome stories about um, outreach to non-members to just like inform them of what we're doing and to invite them. It must be a signal that it's not happening that much, if at all, because we just never hear these stories, like, or that they'd be happening at some cadence on a local level, right?
Yeah.
I absolutely never hear anything about it.
Yeah, well, so there's I can think of a few examples. For example, the giving machines, whatever those things are called that they do,
Yeah, yeah,
and and the Times Square thing. And they have these little campaigns. They've put movies in the theater before, like Meet the Mormons and stuff like that. So the church does stuff, and I'm sure they have a lot of people working on that and trying to figure out what's effective and what's not. What,
you just don't think they are effective?
well, I know they're not effective as the membership could be if they were activated, right? So like for
Oh
just
yeah, yeah.
so we solve problems as a church. We solve problems extremely well at a local level and not very well at a global level, like a church headquarters kind of level, which is fine. I think that's the way it's supposed to be. But we don't apply that same truth to generate solutions worldwide. Like I remember one time, I was on my mission and my companion, no, my we were in a house and we were two companionships, And the other companionship, he was a good friend of mine, and we got transfers, and he was given a companion that he was not going to have. Like, he did not get along with this guy. He didn't like this guy. He didn't want to say one word to him. He was furious. And so he was like, like, what am I going to do? And pretty quickly, he put together this plan and proposed it to the mission president, proposed it to the bishop, and it all worked out perfectly, like basically overnight, where we basically borrowed two teenage boys from the local ward who were 17 years old, and they were companions for that companionship to be on basically permanent splits or permanent exchanges for that whole transfer. So one 17-year-old went to the one companion elder, the other one went to the other. So we actually had three companionships living in that house, that transfer. And that companionship that the president put together never talked to each other the whole mission or the whole transfer. And that worked really well because it was on the local level. But like, could you imagine if the church got wind of that and like, that's a great idea. Let's make that a policy. Every year you got to pick one transfer and do this like ward borrowing young men in division thing across the whole, and like everybody's trying to do it at the same time. It would be a disaster. It would be terrible. And I think that that's the kind of thing that the church can help people imagine and do without making it like an official policy, right? Of
Yeah.
like here's some cool ideas. No, anyway, what I was gonna say is if you do the what's that thing they show after conference and the commercial and the World Report? So the World Report is everything that the church is doing, and they don't usually highlight a lot of like, here's a new idea from a ward, and here's something that's worked really well from the stake, and like all the different ideas like that. Um, and I think that is part of the problem where the church presents itself as we the church, we the headquarters bureaucracy, we are here to solve the problems. Look at all the problems we're solving. At the local level, don't worry about it. But the giving machines, that easily could have been a local unit that was doing that
Yeah.
without the permission of the church. Like they could just do that. They don't need to wait for the church to do that. I mean, local units could be putting up billboards. They could be doing their own
Yeah.
marketing programs. And I think that that's something that would be really fun to see. Something that I would like to encourage is the units to get much more creative. I mean, a while back we were talking about our ward having its own baseball team, like the youth baseball team. We would go to Little League and we would say, "Hey, Little League, all our boys are going to sign up for baseball. They all want to sign up for baseball, but they're all going to be on the same team. And I, the young men's president, am going to coach. That gives you, the Little League team, one more team to work with, right? Like it's another team. So more teams, the better, because you get more competition, whatever. And it helps us strengthen our boys instead of them getting scattered to all these teams every week and like doing a bunch of different schedules that conflict with what we're trying to do, like get them all on the same team." So there's things like that I think would be super cool to start exploring more.
Yeah, I'm sure there's um I mean, I can imagine that because I feel like maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the spirit of what you're getting at is like you want like a lot more grassroots creativity and engagement without completely going off the rails. But the truth is, a lot of church tradition, a lot of what we do, I don't know, is like 90% tradition, 10% the rails, and we can kind of give on a lot of the tradition. Or I know you're not even suggesting that part, but at we can be more creative and be more engaged, on the front lines at coming up with our own ideas. It's kind of interesting because I mean, I just think about kind of business, and that is, I mean, there's probably exceptions to this, But if you're just like a for-profit business and you're trying to survive, the best setup is to have like grassroots engagement and improvement on the front lines. Because the people on the front lines have 1,000 more improvements in their head than the leadership.
Mm.
And so, yeah, at the same time, I feel like there's a flavor of leadership that it takes for that to work. And I'm not saying the church doesn't have this, but I feel like the church is they experiment with stuff, but they don't experiment with stuff like they're trying to survive. I feel like they
Play it safe.
experiment with stuff at their leisure. Um, but I don't know, I'm not on the front lines of like the church as an organization. So maybe there's a lot more of this going on than I realize, but I'm active, I go to church. I don't feel like there's a lot of experimenting going on with, you know, I
Well,
feel like there's a lot of
I
room.
would say you're on the front lines, right? Why would you not be on the front lines?
Sorry, I'm not on the front lines of oh, I see what you're saying. I guess what I'm saying is I'm not in the room with top church leadership as their because I believe the church as like an organization has an insane number of employees, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm not even close to that.
Right.
What's going on there? But yeah, I'm on the front lines of the church. That's a good correction. Yeah. So I'm not. I guess I'm just calling out that I'm pretty ignorant of what's going on in the church as a employed team, of people.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I feel close to my ward, neighborhood, and community. So much so that I feel like obviously I would have more and better ideas for that community than, even a 70 who is over a big area.
Right.
So,
Yeah. So what would be an example of a big problem that your unit's trying to solve that we can just like start from scratch on?
a big problem. I don't know. I mean, I'm okay. I don't know that this is a big problem. Um, I feel pretty fortunate and I don't feel like there's a lot of big problems in our church unit. But if there's like an area that I think all of us kind of express, like, oh, it'd be kind of nice to have that, it would be more casual social gatherings and that don't have a lot of rigidity to it. Like church itself kind of has an amount of rigidity that kind of doesn't make it totally convenient to just do casual conversations a lot. Now, I can take ownership of that on a personal level and an individual level, but you know, as a unit, we've talked like we're trying to do these. In Utah, it's like every couple blocks is its own ward, so it's super convenient in that way that you don't have to travel very far. So we're like, hey, let's all meet in this cul-de-sac and have cookies, and they've done this, I think, twice this year, and that is us, I think, trying to address that like deficit. I think people love it. And that's not nothing. The church never talks about things like that. I mean, except the fact that it might be called a ward activity or something.
Yeah.
Um, are
That's,
you talking about something else? I
no, I mean
mean,
that's basically the idea. There's lots of different examples, but that's one of them. I was just talking to a Relief Society who's doing a Relief Society activity every week. And that's something that we've been trying to do in Elders Quorum for a while.
oh,
But
really? You guys are doing that? I mean, because
no, we're
mom,
trying to, but they're doing it every week and it's a small
yeah,
activity and it's manageable because it's announced in advance and they have multiple communication paths to get the word out. And it's always a simple activity that requires almost no preparation and no cleanup, like really quick. So
yeah,
like we're trying to do the same thing where we're saying we're doing an activity every Thursday after Elders Quorum Sunday, so every 2 weeks. We're just going to be at the church. I'm going to have a deck of cards and a plate of cookies. Every 2 weeks
Hmm.
we'll be there. And so that's breaking the mold because it's really not a church activity. The traditional church activity is
Right.
a gangbuster. It's preparation. You got to set up for hours. You got to clean up for hours and order a bunch of
All the
food.
leaders are stressed about, out
Yeah,
about
and
pulling it
we'll talk
together.
about it for like 2 months, and it's like a nightmare. And
Yeah.
um, and so I think something as simple as that is breaking the mold, or saying we're gonna have cookies in the cul-de-sac every single week. Um, yeah, I think
Yeah.
those ideas are perfect. And there's other like I had a ministering idea years ago, um, before I don't even know if it's still done like this anywhere else, but we started home teaching and visiting teaching by married couple companionships. We scratched the elder companionships and the sister companionships, and we started doing married couples, your companionship, go do your home teaching, visiting teaching.
Mm.
And and at the time that was revolutionary because ministering hadn't come out. Like I had to get permission from the stake president, all this stuff. But it was immediately effective. It worked great. And then like 6 months later or whatever, ministering came out and everybody was like, oh, this gives us a little more flexibility. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And so there, yeah, examples like that. Um, even in Sunday school recently, we had one youth Sunday school class because we're a small unit, and but the class was too big. It was like 16, 18 kids sometimes. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to split the class. And they're like, oh, how are you going to do it? Middle school, high school? And I was like, no, I'm literally going to walk in and I'm going to draw a line down the middle of the room. I'm going to say, this half comes with me. And they were like, no, I don't know if that's a good idea because if you mix the ages too much, they're not really going to like, they're not on the same level. And I was like, okay, well, I'll try it, see how it goes. And so I did it for, I think, 4 weeks where I cut them down the middle and I got a good spread of all the different ages. And I thought it went great. It was really weird for people who weren't used to it, but I thought it was really good because it changes the dynamic. Like when you have a 12-year-old and a 16-year-old in the same class, they're picking up on different things and like playing off of each other in a different way. Um, and they also kind of like take care of each other rather than compete with each other. Like two 16-year-olds compete with each other. A 16-year-old and a 12-year-old take care of each other. So
Yeah.
it's things like that, just like I just wish people would, I guess give themselves permission isn't the right idea, but strengthen the muscle of thinking outside the box. So when stuff comes up and they're like, why are we doing it like that? They can start thinking of other ways to do it.
Yeah. I think it is. Oh man. Yeah. I think to the average person, it's just hard. I mean, I mean, I feel like I'm walking into church every Sunday and going to activities, and I'm not all the time thinking about how to shake things up or how to like optimize things. I mean, things come to my mind for sure, but I'm guessing the average person is just kind of similar to that, you know. And it's not like the church itself, and it's not like I'm not a victim to this or anything, but I feel like it's not like the church themselves has. I think the closest thing they have to kind of like a feedback loop of, hey, how could we do things different for our area is ward council. Is like something
Yeah.
like that, where presidency councils where it's like, hey, X isn't working out. But it's not like, I think the most the handbook talks about is like, hey, make sure you counsel about the needs of the people, and it has its list. But I don't think it mentions anywhere there about like, and really think about your area, like what do your people need, and really consider shaking things up. And like it's definitely not going to say consider shaking things up.
Yeah.
um, I,
And shaking things up isn't quite the right language either, but yeah, I know what you mean.
it's the language that makes sense to me as long as you can define what the rails are and you stay on the rails.
Well,
Um,
that's what's interesting because the church leadership wants to make sure nothing bad happens, right? Like that's why there's
Yeah.
a handbook, is because they want to make sure nothing bad happens, which is honorable. And then if you combine that with a membership that is afraid to make a mistake, now you get
Yeah.
this very like we're all soldiers marching to the same beat, like don't get out of step, like you're afraid
It's
of,
just dead. Yeah.
yeah,
It's dead.
it's really bad. And so
Yeah.
there's got to be some balance. And the best way to make it balanced is to work with people who have been in the trenches for a long time. But the longer you're in the trenches, the more you know the rails, so you know not to go off the rails. But the less creative you are because you've been so entrenched, you've been so accustomed to how things have been.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
really, it's just really hard. Like I was thinking about ward councils the other day and how, sometimes you kind of just get stuck and you're just kind of talking about the same things and the same problems
Yeah.
and really no solutions. And I was thinking about the conversation we had a while back. I was like, we just need to have dinner with more people. Like
Yeah.
everybody in ward council just needs to invite somebody over to their house for dinner once a week and then come back to ward council and report on how it went. And then the next week, do the same thing. And because in the room, you've got what, 6 families at least? So 6 families
Yeah.
inviting 6 families over for dinner every single week. That's everybody in the ward is socializing in a much more prolific way than like sitting there and being like, okay, well, they need a ride to the doctor. Who's going to give them a ride to the doctor? Okay, this person needs a meal because they just had a baby. Like, what the crap is that? It's like totally firefighting and not building trusting relationships that'll last long term.
Yeah, that's interesting you say this. I mean, this is going to sound off topic, but the spirit of it is exactly the same. So, you know, I'm I'm kind of getting knee deep in like the lean philosophy and practice at work, and I'm reading a book right now. It's called Gemba Kaizen,
Uh,
and it's all about. I mean, Gemba means the real place,
yeah,
and they
that's
harp
what,
on like this is like like I'm in a building right now where work happens, but 99% of this building is not the Gemba. It's like at the specific location, values being created. Anyway, it's been eye-opening because I'm realizing so much of life is about your courage in getting on the Gemba of life
yeah,
and like getting to the front lines. And yeah, so anyway, I totally agree because the what this book would say about word council is that it is not the real information.
yeah,
Word council is only the interpretation of the real information, which is people in homes. And like the Gemba would be sitting down with the people in homes. So anyway, yeah, I totally agree. And I don't do that. I don't do that. And I mean, I give myself some credit. I do it a little bit, but I know I could do it more. And um, I give myself all kinds of excuses. It's like, oh man, got dinner, got to put the kids down. And
I don't think
so,
that's where I was talking again with the Relief Society president, where it's like you got to be careful with the metrics because if you say I'm not doing it enough, I could do it more, you start getting into this thing of like I need to do it 5 hours a week or else I'm not doing it
yeah,
enough.
yeah, yeah,
And it
I
really
totally agree.
it's not about the how much, it's about the motive. So like if I was going to do it in ward council, this is how I do it. I'd say, okay, our metric is how many hours we spend with another family. Either you are in their home or they're in your home. Or maybe you're at the park, whatever. How many hours you're spending. So each week you're going to come in and you're going to report how many hours you spent with another family. Not like a baseball game where you both just happen to run into each other, but intentionally set aside time to be with that family. So the first week is 3 hours, second week's 5 hours, whatever. So you build up these hours and you're like, get to a point where it's like consistently 10 hours. And maybe that takes like 6 months or whatever. And then after that, you throw away the metric and you're like, okay, now that you guys understand this rhythm, let's talk about the whys. Like it's really important that we are motivated for the right reasons to be with these people. Can you guys feel that you were not just checking boxes? We're not just racking up hours. Like you're not just prolonging a visit because you want to be able to report more time. You're actually interested in them. Like that's kind of the framework of
Huh.
how I would do it is help you
Yeah.
understand the what and then pair it with the why. Like that's what was always missing in home teaching. Home teaching was always, here's an Ensign article, we're going to come to your house, we're going to read it, and we're going to say goodbye. There was never any
Yeah.
why.
Yeah. I feel like some of these things had the right spirit to them, but the culture turned into kind of a behavioral checkbox. But yeah, I mean, but literally the metrics of home teaching was a behavioral checkbox. So
Yeah.
maybe that's where it went wrong. But I do think it's interesting that you start with a metric and then eventually throw it out. I've never thought about that. I mean, it kind of reminds me of like progressing from the letter of the law to like the spirit of the law or something. Um, I mean, yeah, it makes sense to me.
I think
Yeah,
I think it would work um, until it doesn't work, meaning you should be able to feel it in your unit, in your ward. You should be able to
100%.
feel where the
Yeah.
metric is. And so if that metric starts to dive, you won't need to track it to know it's going to dive. You'll just be able to feel it. And you'll be like, you know what? Let's go back to that metric. It's been a couple of years. I don't think we're quite where we need to be. Let's see where we're at. Okay, here's a pulse check. 2 hours. Oh yeah, okay. We definitely need some improvement there. So it's not like throw it out
Yeah.
forever. It's use it when it's appropriate. But if you're using it all the time, I mean, that's kind of the problem with home teaching and some of the stuff that I don't like. Um, yeah, we probably need to start trying to wrap up, huh? Half hour. So I've had this problem at work for a long time where years ago, one of the upper guys was like, what's the most important thing for your department? And I was like, we need more representation from headquarters to be here in the building so that they know what's going on. And he basically said, wrong. That's not what you need. What you need is to report your data more clean, more accurately so that we at headquarters know what's going on. Because we're not coming to you. We're not coming to
It's
you.
totally, yeah, this totally goes against the Gemba stuff I was just talking
Yeah.
about, you know?
Yeah, exactly. We're not coming to you. You just need to accurately represent your data and don't give us anecdotes. Don't email me and tell me what's going on. Show me data of what's going on. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that is so twisted. And I know why he said that. And there's a lot of truth to what he said, and there's a lot of good reasons why we would do that. It doesn't make it right, but I understand why he's doing that. I think it's a combination of both. You got to have good data, and you also have to be boots on the ground. That's where
Yeah.
that's where it happens. And the church is the same thing. So home teaching, visiting teaching, attendance in church, tithe paying, like all of this is data that goes up. And the leadership at the top is trying to make decisions based on that data. And they do get out to the field and they do have boots on the ground, but they could have much more. I mean, I could get called as a missionary, like as a senior missionary or whatever, even as a young missionary. I could get called to go to a certain area, and all I do is this. I just go from ward to ward and I observe and I report back to my 70 or apostle or whoever it is that's interested. And I say, I'm your boots on the ground and I'm here to do, we'll call it a, we'll call it a spiritual or ministering assessment. I'm here to perform an assessment on this unit or stake or ward, whatever it is. And the
Yeah.
assessment has nothing to do with like how many tithe payers and stuff like that. Like maybe that's included,
Right.
but it's not the assessment is what are you doing that's working and how can I introduce ideas to you that are working somewhere else that are going to help you, right? So
Hmm.
it's this turnaround of like I'm here to check up on you and then help. And then I just go to the next unit and I just do it again. Go next unit, do it again. And just like constantly rolling through this kind of improvement process. Like that would be the counterpart to all of this data that's just flowing up and everybody's trying to figure out what it means.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that it's a mix of data and a mix of boots on the ground, and that as soon as it becomes overweighted on data, that nobody really knows that the actual real information. I mean, they only have kind of extrapolations of things. Because I think it's possible, for example, that data going up looks terrible because there's terrible data keepers in the area, but they actually have a thriving community, right? And so, and I don't think the problem there should be like, hey, you guys need to really work on your data. I think that could be solved by having a boots on the grounds that passes that up and says, hey guys, just so you know, you're getting bad data, but things are going really well here. But I wonder if like the church organization would answer that by saying, well, yeah, that's your bishop. Your bishop is boots on the grounds. Your stake president is boots on the grounds. And I
Yeah.
don't know the answer there. I mean, I could tell, like, I don't, I
Yeah.
see my bishop pretty often, but I'm also in a calling where I associate with him a lot.
Yeah. So
I don't know.
your high council and your bishop, the problem is they've got a lot going on and they're not called to assess and do that specific boots on the ground work. They're called to represent their unit. Like for example, if you had a traveling bishop,
Yes.
that would probably fit better what I'm describing.
Yeah,
But
yeah, 100%. I totally agree that I just think the church leadership might be their first gut reaction. I imagine if I were them, I'd say that. I'm like, well, what do you mean you'll be my boots on the ground? We kind of already have that, right? We have our bishop and high council and stake
yeah,
president. Um, but I totally agree that like I think the expectation for them is far more about the structured reoccurring meetings than it is about being boots on the ground. I mean, I guess to clarify boots on the ground, um, in my mind, and I'm highly biased by Lane right now, boots on the ground would mean like they're going into homes. Like that's like they're getting a sampling of the homes,
yeah.
not necessarily like there's no way that like an Area 70 can visit even 5% of our homes and do that for his whole area. But um, you can do a version of that though, you
Yeah,
know?
no, I think that would be part of the assessment. Like when I imagine an assessment, it's not a sacrament meeting assessment. It's like it could be 100 hours a week work assessment because you're going to ward council, you're going to sacrament meeting, and then you're visiting a couple homes every day. You're visiting the youth activities. You're visiting local congregations that are not part of the church, like whatever
Yeah,
Christian
okay. Yeah.
community. You're going to the schools, like, hey, I've got members of the church that go to your school. Do they stand out in any way? Like, what's going on? Do they get in fights? What are the, can I help? And so there's a ton of assessment
Woo!
categories that could be done. And the point isn't to get the right sample size. That could be the point, but the point that I'm talking about is to glean ideas that can then be replicated. Like
Yeah.
there's so many members around the church, there's so many units that we don't have a sample size problem. Like we have the data, we have the sample sizes. What we don't have is a data set that represents anything outside of the data set that we've had for 100 years. Like where's the creative data set? Where's the experimental data set? Where's the things that we've never thought
Yeah.
of data set?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess I agree to a degree. I mean, I know that they are running experiments. I was a part of a few experiments at one point in one ward. I can't remember what they were doing, but they were running something and they wanted our feedback, and we did it for like 6 months. Um, but no, I know you're not saying that they never do that. Um, I just agree. I mean, you're painting that like role of you going as far as like going into the schools, going to these activities, and you do all that for like over the course of 2 weeks or something. Um, that would be really fascinating because I think a person that had good judgment, and I don't even know how you pick that person out of a crowd, but a person that has good judgment, I feel like could have a strong sense after being very involved for even just a few weeks of like the vibe and the needs of like that area, and like a in a way that they could share a lot of information, right? And they could pass it upstream, downstream. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing like that exists today. I mean, especially, I mean, the bishop has been significantly siloed into the youth, right? And so they're hyper focused on the youth. Elders Quorum is hyper focused on the adults. So there's these, I don't think anybody's getting a breadth. There's no one at the local level that's getting a breadth
Yeah. Yeah, probably
of
not
what's going on.
currently set up. I mean, then the byproduct of that kind of an assessment type of role would be that you'd walk in as an assessor and you'd see something going on and be like, hey, Bishop of Ward 101, you should get in touch with Bishop of Ward 201 because he's solving the problems that you're complaining about. Which right now
Mhm.
there's no like, maybe in a stake you get a stake president who's smart enough to kind of connect people like that. But what if the bishop that's solving the problem is in a different state or a different country?
Yeah.
You've got to have a much broader vision of what's going on to be able to connect people like that. And members are trying to do it on their own. They have Relief Society Facebook groups and stuff like that where it's presidents only, and they're talking about, how to interpret different policies and stuff. But imagine if that was led by someone who's actually walked the streets with all of those Relief Society presidents and knows the strengths of the different, like, one Relief Society president's a nurse, and so she did this whole like nursing campaign with her Relief Society. You should reach out to her because she's got some great ideas and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thinking outside the box, I think we're gonna call this video "Thinking Outside the LDS Box" or something like that.
There you go. Yeah. I like it.
It feels like it'll be like kind of they have the videos of why does this channel exist. This is kind of like the one of the things that encapsulates a purpose that I wanted to do with this. Cool. Any other thoughts?
Yeah. No other thoughts. Are you trying to keep these to a certain amount of time? Is that why you're cutting it?
Uh,
I'm not. I
no,
don't necessarily want more or anything, but okay.